That hard, cracked, brick-colored dirt in your yard, the stuff every garden center swears you have to fix? It's the most nutrient-rich soil you own. Clay grabs onto food and water and holds them tight, while sandy good soil lets it all wash straight through. After 20 years of growing, I'll tell you what they won't. You don't need a single bag of amended topsoil. You need plants that already love clay, and there are more of them than the industry ever wants you to find out. These are the ones that turn your worst, wettest, hardest spot into the best-looking bed on the block. Nobody was paying attention to the dirt itself. For years you blamed the weather, the watering, your own two hands, anything but the ground. And that hard clay just sat there quietly, ready to grow almost anything you asked of it. That was about to change. One piece of advice matters more than any single plant on this list. When you dig your hole in clay, do not fill it back up with fluffy store-bought soil. I know that feels wrong. But what you have just made is a bowl. The roots circle around inside that nice soft pocket. The surrounding clay holds water like a teacup, and the plant drowns or stays stunted because the roots never push out into the real ground. Plant straight into the clay, set the crown a little high so water drains away from it, and let the plant do what it evolved to do. According to the Missouri Botanical Garden, the better path with heavy clay is choosing plants suited to the site rather than fighting the soil itself. Keep that in your back pocket for all 11 of these. Number 11. Hosta. If your hard clay also sits in shade, under a tree or along the north side of the house, hosta is your answer. Almost everything else on this list wants sun. Hosta wants the opposite, and it happens to shrug off heavy, moisture-holding soil that would rot a fussier plant. It is hardy across roughly zones 3 through 9, which covers almost everyone watching, and you can find a starter pot at a local nursery for $3 to $8 depending on size. Those big sculptural leaves come back fuller every spring with no work from you. Here is the planting tip that saves the plant. Set it high. In clay that stays wet, you want the crown sitting just slightly above the surrounding grade so spring rain sheds away instead of pooling on top of it. Dig wide, not deep. Loosen the sides of the hole with your fork, and do not bury the crown. The surprising benefit is multiplication. A single hosta spreads into a clump you can split with a spade every 3 or 4 years, and each division is a brand new plant for another shady corner. One pot in spring becomes a whole shaded border in a few seasons, all from that one purchase, in the exact damp clay everybody told you to dig out. Number 10. Cranesbill Geranium. This is the hardy geranium, not the red annual you buy in a hanging basket every May and throw away every fall. Cranesbill is a tough perennial ground cover, hardy across roughly zones 4 through 8, and it takes heavy clay without complaint. It forms a low mound of pretty cut leaves and throws up small 5-petaled flowers in blue, pink, or purple for weeks, then keeps its tidy foliage the rest of the season. A pot runs about $5 to $8, and it knits together into a weed-smothering carpet faster than almost anything. The planting tip here is spacing for coverage. Set them about 18 inches apart, and within 2 seasons they close the gaps completely, which means no bare clay left for weeds to colonize. After the first flush of bloom fades, you can shear the whole thing back by a third, and it pushes out fresh leaves and often a second round of flowers. The surprising benefit is how it earns its keep doing 2 jobs at once. It is a flowering plant and a living mulch in the same package, covering the ground so densely that the worst, hardest soil disappears under a blanket of green you never have to weed. Number 9. Deer Villa. Deer Villa, sometimes sold as bush honeysuckle, is one of those shrubs the pros use and homeowners walk right past. It is a tough native shrub, hardy across roughly zones 3 through 7, and it thrives in conditions that defeat prettier shrubs, including dry clay, wet clay, slopes, and shade. It grows into a low, suckering mound about 3 feet tall with small yellow flowers in summer and foliage that often takes on a coppery, red tone. Proven Winners lists it among the shrubs that genuinely hold up in tough clay soil, and that matches what I have seen in the ground. The planting tip is to put it where you have given up. Deer Villa sends out roots that knit a slope together, so that eroding bank of bare clay where grass will not catch is exactly its job. Plant it high, water it through the first summer to get it rooted, then leave it be. The surprising benefit is the erosion control itself. Those spreading roots lock down a hillside that would otherwise wash out in every hard rain, so you are getting a flowering shrub that also does the work of a retaining wall, on the kind of difficult clay slope no one wants to deal with. Number 8. New England Aster. When everything else in the yard is shutting down for the year, the New England Aster is just getting started. It is a tall native perennial, hardy across roughly zones 4 through 8, and it actively prefers the heavier, moisture-holding soils that other fall flowers sulk in. Come September and October, it covers itself in purple, pink, or violet daisy flowers, with golden centers, right when the garden needs color most. Nurse pot costs about $4 to $7, and a single plant grows into a substantial stand within a couple of seasons. The planting tip is to pinch it. If you cut the stems back by about a third in early summer, around the time the days get long, the plant comes back bushier and shorter, and covered in even more flowers instead of flopping over tall and leggy. 5 minutes with the pruners, and that is the whole trick. The surprising benefit is the timing of the food it offers. New England aster is one of the last big nectar sources of the year, so it feeds the migrating monarch butterflies and the late bees stocking up for winter when almost nothing else is blooming, all from a plant rooted in damp clay. Number 7. Black-eyed Susan. Rudbeckia is a native wildflower that grows wild along highway medians across the eastern half of the country. In compacted roadside ground, nobody waters or feeds. If it can take the gravel and exhaust of an interstate shoulder, your backyard clay is a vacation. It is hardy across roughly zones 3 through 9, and a 1-gallon pot runs about $4 to $6. From midsummer through the first hard frost, it throws out those golden dark-centered daisies, and it shrugs off heat, drought, and heavy soil while it does it. The planting tip is to leave the seed head standing. When the flowers finish, do not cut the plant down for tidiness. Those dark cones are packed with seed. The surprising benefit is what comes from that one bit of laziness. Goldfinches and other small birds work the seed heads through the fall and winter, giving you a free bird show in the cold months, and the seeds that drop sprout into new plants next spring. One pot becomes a drift, the birds get fed, and you spent nothing past that first $4. The only thing Black-eyed Susan cannot tolerate is soil that stays soaking wet all year, so as long as your clay drains at all after a rain, this one thrives. Number 6. Bee balm. Monarda, or bee balm, is a native perennial that hummingbirds treat like a filling station, and it happens to love the moist, rich clay that holds water near the surface. It is hardy across roughly zones 4 des a pot. In midsummer, it opens shaggy crowns of red, pink, or purple right when the hummingbirds are most active, and it spreads by underground runners into a generous colony within 2 or 3 seasons. The planting tip is about airflow and variety choice. Bee balm can get powdery mildew on its leaves in still, humid spots, so give it a little room for the breeze to move through, and reach for a mildew-resistant variety if your nursery offers one. The named red selections tend to hold up best. If a colony spreads farther than you want, pulling the edges in spring takes about 5 minutes. The surprising benefit is what shows up because of it. Plant bee balm, where you can see it from a kitchen window, and you get a live hummingbird show every afternoon in July, which beats a $30 feeder you have to scrub and refill every 3 days. And it is rooted in the damp clay everyone else is trying to dig out. Number 5. Daylily. If I could only plant one thing in bad clay, it might be the daylily, because nothing else is this tough for this little money. You can buy a single fan for $3 to $5, and within 2 seasons that one fan becomes a clump of 8 to 12. Daylilies handle full sun, part shade, heavy clay, drought, and even road salt, and they grow across roughly zones 3 through 9, which is almost everyone. They are not a true lily, and most are pest-proof and disease-proof in ordinary gardens. The planting tip is to plant the crown shallow and firm the clay gently around the fleshy roots, then water it in. That is genuinely the whole procedure. The surprising benefit is the free multiplication. By the 3rd or 4th year, you are lifting that clump and splitting it into 5 or 6 divisions, every one a full plant you can run down a fence line or a driveway edge for nothing. A reblooming variety like the common gold one will give you waves of flower from June into fall if you snap off the spent stalks. But even ignored, it still blooms all summer long, in the heavy soil that supposedly grows nothing. If that one miserable wet corner of your yard is starting to look like an opportunity, do me a favor and subscribe. This channel puts out budget gardening guides like this every week, and there is plenty more coming on, growing more for a whole lot less. Number 4. Smooth hydrangea. Hydrangeas have a reputation for being fussy. The smooth hydrangea, the native one often sold under the name Annabelle, is the exception, and it genuinely likes the cool, moisture-holding clay that other shrubs hate. It is hardy across roughly zones 3 through 9, tougher and cold than the blue mophead types, and a shrub runs anywhere from $15 to $30, though it pays you back for decades. In summer, it carries enormous white flower heads the size of a dinner plate, and it does it in part shade where a lot of flowering shrubs give up. The planting tip is the one that goes against instinct. Do not amend the planting hole with bagged soil. Dig it wide so the roots can spread sideways through the clay. Set the shrub at the same depth it sat in the pot or a touch higher, and backfill with the native ground you dug out. Water deeply through the first year while it establishes. The surprising benefit is the reliability of the bloom. The smooth hydrangea flowers on the current season's new growth, so even after a brutal winter or a hard spring pruning, it still blooms that same summer without fail, unlike the temperamental blue ones that skip a year every time the weather turns. Fine gardening counts the smooth hydrangea among the standout shrubs for clay soil, and in 20 years I have never seen one disappoint in that ground. Number 3. Siberian Iris. The Siberian iris is one of the most graceful plants you can grow, and, unlike its fussier cousins, it positively thrives in heavy damp clay. It is hardy across roughly zones 3 through 8 and runs about $6 to $10 a pot. In late spring it sends up elegant blue, purple or white flowers on tall, slender stems above narrow grass-like leaves, and that foliage stays handsome and upright all season long, holding its shape even after the flowers are gone. The planting tip is about depth and patience. Plant the rhizomes shallow, just under the surface, and give the clump a year or two to settle in before you expect a full show, because Siberian iris establishes slowly and then takes off. It almost never needs dividing, and it does not get the borers and rots that plague the big bearded irises. The surprising benefit is the toughness behind the elegance. This is a plant that looks delicate and expensive, the kind of thing you would expect to need pampering, yet it will sit happily in a low, wet spot of clay where water collects after every storm and most perennials would simply rot away. Number 2. Baptisia. Baptisia, also called false indigo, is a native perennial that behaves more like a shrub, and it is built for exactly the tough clay everyone complains about. It is hardy across roughly zones 3 through 9 and costs about $8 to $12 a pot. In late spring it sends up tall spikes of blue, purple, yellow, or white pea-like flowers, and after those fade it forms a rounded mound of blue-green foliage that looks good and holds its shape clear through to frost, asking for nothing. The planting tip is to choose the spot once and leave it. Baptisia grows a deep, woody taproot that drives straight down through dense clay, which is the secret to its drought toughness. But that same taproot means it hates being moved once established. Plant it where you want it for the long haul, set it high, and be patient the first couple of years while it builds that root system underground before it really takes off above. The surprising benefit comes from that very root. As a member of the pea family, Baptisia works with soil bacteria to pull nitrogen out of the air and fix it into the ground, so it actually feeds the soil around it instead of draining it, slowly improving the very clay people were so desperate to replace. Number 1. Serviceberry. I am giving the top spot to the serviceberry, sometimes sold as amalancher or juneberry, because it is the rare plant that does everything at once and does it in heavy, moist clay. It is hardy across roughly zones 3 through 8 and works as either a large, multi-stemmed shrub or a small tree, running about $20 to $40. It tolerates the wet, heavy soil that kills a lot of ornamental trees, and it gives you something in every single season of the year. The planting tip is the same discipline as the hydrangea. Dig wide, not deep, plant it level with the ground or slightly high, and backfill with the native clay rather than buying a bag of anything. Stake it only if it is in a windy spot, and water it deeply through that first year. The surprising benefit is the food, and it is real food for you. In spring you get clouds of white flowers. In early summer the plant ripens small purple berries that taste like a sweet blueberry crossed with an almond, and in fall the leaves turn fiery orange and red. The birds will race you to those berries, so pick them when they color up. The Missouri Botanical Garden includes serviceberry among the woody plants recommended for problem clay soils, and it is the one plant on this list that pays you in flowers, fruit, and fall color, all from the same wet, hard ground the garden center told you to fix. So look at that miserable corner again. The hard ground, the spot that stays wet after a storm, the brick-colored clay you have been apologizing for. Every plant I just named would rather grow there than in the bagged, fluffy, expensive soil the store keeps trying to sell you. You were never short on good dirt. You were just one plant list away from using the dirt you already had. Pick 2 or 3 of these, plant them high, skip the amendments, and let that worst patch in your yard turn into the part the neighbors ask about. If this gave you an idea worth digging, there are more stories like this on the channel.